the IATF 16949 podcast, where we talk about all things automotive. Find us on our channel at youtube.com/IATF 16949 auditing, or visit our website at www.iatfglobaloversight.org. This is the IATF 16949 podcast.
And Devin, is there anything about what about major non-conformities? What does the Rule 6? Because obviously we just talked about minor non-conformities, which are kind of verified during the next audit, but major non-conformities are a bit different, aren't they? What are the new rules around verifying major non-conformities?
Yeah, so once again they got, I won't say stricter, but more defined on what they would expect. So obviously we know that major nonconformities, they're going to result in having a special audit for the auditor come on site and verify effective implementation of the corrective actions. Yeah. So now we're defining the audit time that should be included for those on site. So for each major, between 1 and 3 hours, depending on the extent of the corrective action, right?
Yeah.
And that's obviously the certification body will determine it based on the input received from the client themselves.
Yeah. And again, it still gives a little bit of flexibility within the certification body, but the parameters are much clearer now that if a major non-conformity was raised, when the certification body comes back to do that special audit to verify the effective implementation of non-conformities, everybody now knows that it's going to be between 1 to 3 hours activity for that one major non-conformity. And again, that I think is a good thing in terms of driving consistency and effectiveness.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's the name of the game over here.
Yeah.
And then obviously one of the biggest changes to come out of Rule 6 is audit duration for corporate schemes. I know the IATF has received a lot of stakeholder feedback about this. Just tell the audience here, guys.
Yeah. So so you're right, Devin. This is a really a big change. What we've had in the past with Rules 5th is some fairly generous audit day reductions for corporate schemes. So depending on the number of sites within a corporate scheme, organizations can attract somewhere between 20 and 40% reduction in the audit duration. That's changed in Rule 6, so that has changed to one standard discount reduction is probably a better word, of 15%. So organizations that are part of a corporate scheme really just being a corporate quality management system managed from a central location across more than one manufacturing site. And if organizations are eligible to be organized in a corporate scheme, then they, under Rule 6, will benefit from a 15% reduction to the minimum audit day calculation. So that in a way, Devin, you're right, is a big change. There's no graduation, there's no kind of 20, 30, 40% reduction. It's one single reduction, regardless of the number of sites, of 15%.
And Niall, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's feeding back to just how many requirements are within IATF 16949 and how long it takes the auditors to go through those requirements. So when you see those big reductions, the auditors weren't having enough time to make sure they're doing an effective audit.
Yeah, exactly, Devin. And there's two things. One, you're absolutely right. There's there's all of the 9001, the IATF requirements, customer specific requirements. There's no shortage of of requirements, but also we're talking here often about large corporate complex organizations. So it's very difficult to justify such a large reduction in audit duration for those, again, often complicated, large multinational organizations. So but you're right, it's an important and significant change that Rule 6 brings in.
And that's just for the corporate schemes. There are other reductions allowed within
Absolutely.
both Rules 5th and Rule 6th. I believe there was a change to that as well, though.
Yeah. That's a great point. So there are a number of, so if you're an organization going for your initial IATF 16949 audit, there are a number of factors to consider that will allow your certification body to reduce the amount of audit time. So the one example would be product design. So if an organization does not do product design activity, then they are eligible for a 15% reduction in the audit day calculation. That hasn't changed. So Rule 6 still retains that 15% reduction. I think one of the big changes is the overall level of reduction, which under Rules 5th, when you consider all the variables, would be allowed to reduce the audit duration by a maximum of 50%. Under Rule 6, that reduces to a maximum of 30%. So you cannot reduce the audit duration by anything more than 30% for your initial IATF 16949 audit when considering all of the permitted reductions that are defined in section 5.4 of the rules.
Yeah, I think that's important, right?
Yeah.
That's a bit of a change there. And once again, it all goes back to we're just trying to make sure that the auditor has enough time to do an effective audit.
Yeah.
So as we go through rules, I think audit planning is probably the next section that had a bit of change to it.
Yeah.
Requirement 5.7.1 talks about the information that the client's required to provide the certification body prior to the audit.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So again, around audit planning, Devin, I think there are a few sort of key changes. One of them that impacts certification bodies particularly is the allocation of time to undertake the audit planning activity. So we've talked already in this session about minimum audit days. That table that we have in Rule 6 that allows certification bodies to calculate audit duration doesn't include time spent on audit planning. So audit planning is something completely separate. And what we've seen with Rule 6 is a requirement that the certification body allocates a minimum half a day to the auditor, the audit team, to do the audit planning activity. So again, we see that as a really important change. We all know that the sort of planning is such a fundamental part of audit, and again, assigning this minimum time to it will help ensure its effectiveness. I think from a client point of view, under Rules 5th, they already had a sort of list of inputs that they have to provide to their certification body to allow the certification body to do the audit planning. And that's under section 5.7.1. And good news is it's still under 5.7.1 in Rule 6. The key difference is that the client has to provide that information no less than 30 days before the start date of the audit. So I think under Rules 5, there was a bit more flexibility around when that information was provided, but Rule 6 has tightened that up and has actually said, well, this is what you as a client need to provide your certification body. It's listed under 5.7.1 in Rule 6, and it's now saying you must provide that at least 30 days before the start date of the audit.
And back to your point, that's to help the auditor prepare for the audits. Once again, we're driving effectiveness, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
If he's able to pre-look at the material, he or she's able to pre-look at the material, they'll be able to be more prepared for the audit.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess the connection there is not only does the client have that requirement to provide the audit planning information no less than 30 days before the start of the audit, the CB now has to again review that information. They've been allocated time to do that and submit an audit plan at least 14 days before the start date of the audit. Again, that's a brand new requirement. In Rules 5, there was no requirement other than to provide the audit plan before the start of the audit. We're now saying in Rule 6, it has to be at least 14 days before the start date of the audit.
Yeah, and that should really help the certified organization so they can prepare, they can know who needs to be where when. So make sure you have the right process owners available according to the audit plan. So.
Yeah.
The IATF 16949 podcast, where we talk about all things automotive. Find us on our channel at youtube.com/IATF 16949 auditing, or visit our website at www.iatfglobaloversight.org. This is the IATF 16949 podcast.